Hey there. Welcome to music publishing. My lord, let me apologize. First of all, this looks a little bit like a hostage video, and I feel like a bit of a hostage. I don't know, I could use some makeup, maybe a hair person, as I mentioned to you. But, here we go. What are we going to do? Well, what you need to have with you is your agreement. Remember that thing? Because we're going to go through it paragraph by paragraph. So you can read along with me and make some notes in the margin. And then also have a copy of your outline handy because while most of what I want you to know is on there, there are some stuff that you're going to need to take down to remind yourself if we ever get to tests and grading, things like that. But mostly what we're just going to learn is we're going to learn this is a very, very valuable skill in the world of publishing, in the world of music, in the world of business, and that is the ability to read a contract, to interpret a contract, and to negotiate a contract. So I'm going to try to teach you how to do that. We're going to do it with a bunch of contracts over the next month. So hopefully you'll get better at that, get a skill. It's not an easy thing. It's something you need to work at and need to do a lot. We are going to do a lot of it. So we hope to give you those skills. I'm not just going to tell you what this agreement means or says. I'm going to tell you what most agreements may mean or say so they can use this skill to an agreement you've never seen before because you get some general kind of interpretation and negotiation skills. So the first one we're going to do is this puppy right here. Now when we talk about publishing agreements between a publisher and a writer, as I've mentioned, I don't know, 100 times, any agreement you come across is going to be one of two types of agreements, and it's going to be one of three different types of agreements. So there's 6 potential types of agreements based upon which one it is of those two, one from column A and one from column B. Column A, as we've discussed, is it's either going to be a single song agreement, which means it's an agreement that applies just to a song, or actually could be a group of songs, but it's just here I am the writer and I'm giving you the rights to this one song or to these 2 songs, and then I'm free to go do whatever I want to and write for whomever else I want to write for. That's one type of agreement. The other type of agreement is an exclusive songwriter agreement, and that is where the writer is bound exclusively to the publisher for some period of time, and anything that they write becomes subject to that agreement. Those are 2 very different agreements. Which one is this one? I don't know. It's right in the title. It says exclusive term songwriter agreement, so that's what it is. It's an exclusive songwriter agreement. Then it's also going to be one of 3 agreements based on the bargaining power of the parties, as we've discussed a million times. And that is if you have no bargaining power as a writer, you're going to sign a full publishing agreement where lots of the rights and ownership and money goes to the publisher. If you have a little bit more bargaining power, like a recording artist or a successful songwriter, make it a co-publishing agreement where as the writer you get to hold on to some of the ownership and get a little bit more of the money. And then third, it could be an administration agreement, which means that as the writer or another publisher, I'm not going to give any ownership to that other publisher. They're going to have very limited rights, and they're only going to keep a small percentage of that income. So it's going to be one of those 3. And which one of those 3 is it? In this case, this is anyone know? Tanner? A full publishing agreement. That is correct. So out of the 6 types of agreements this can be, this is an exclusive songwriter full publishing agreement. Now, even though many of these agreements are very standard and a lot of the terms in them are very standard, you should always approach a contract very creatively because there are very few rules as to what can be agreed to between parties. So the more creative you are in coming to solutions, things that take care of you and take care of the other party, the better off you're going to be with your final agreement. So be creative and realize that when you negotiate an agreement, really almost anything's possible. Or as I like to say, anything's possible. That is my impersonation of 1970s magician Doug Henning, who used to say, in the world of, he had a mustache, big 70s mustache, permy hair, and an overbite. And he'd say, in the world of illusion, anything's possible. Yeah, so that's a dead-on impersonation. If you want to go look it up, put me on pause, go Google him, and tell me how spot on I was with that impersonation, because it is good stuff. All right, so the first term of this agreement that we'll discuss is the exclusivity, which is in paragraph 1. It essentially states, as you noted in your summaries, the writer is giving the publisher their exclusive personal services. And that's going to be the case in many, many agreements in this business, so get used to it. And when you're looking at why terms exist the way they do, try to understand both parties' perspectives to see whether it's legitimate or not, and to see whether you can negotiate that, whether there's any room for negotiation in terms of being creative with taking care of your concerns or the publisher's concerns in this case. The publisher needs this to be exclusive the same way a record company and a booking agent and a manager need their agreements to be exclusive, is because allegedly they are investing in you. They're paying you advances, they're making demos, they're putting their staff to work to try to get uses for your material and to promote you as a writer. And so they don't want you going out making money off of their efforts without them involved. They don't want you doing something competitive to what they are doing. They want to get the full result of your services. They don't want you doing something that's going to take time away from what you're doing for them. So that their right to that exclusivity is okay. From a writer's point of view, exclusivity is always kind of a scary thing. It's like getting married, is that you're exclusive to this person, and if it's not working out, what are you going to do? Now you might think, well, if it's not working out, the publisher will let me go. But that's not always the case. For one reason or another, for spite, they might not let you go. Maybe your evaluation of what's going well is not the same as theirs. If they're making money off you just a little bit, that's a good investment, but it may not be taking you in the direction and to the extent you want your career to go in. So it's a very scary, scary thing, but you're going to have to agree to it. So be mindful. Just make sure that they are truly investing in you. If somebody's signing you to an exclusive term songwriter agreement and they're not paying you nothing, then you should be able to get, it should be non-exclusive, or you should be able to get out of it or something. So be careful about that. Also keep in mind how these things are worded. Whenever you're granting rights to someone, in this case, the writer's granting rights to their services to the publisher, whenever somebody's granting rights, make sure they're as narrow and specific as possible so you're not giving away more than you think you're giving away. Obviously, from the publisher's point of view, they want to get as many rights as possible. So be wary of those two things. The contractual language you should always be mindful of, and the reason why contracts are written so verbosely is because somebody's trying to be as narrow and specific as possible, or as broad and general as possible. Now, the biggest danger in a publishing agreement about the grant of services is that you don't want them to be a work made for hire. It's not really acceptable in this business, or normal, or standard, but if there's language in there that says it's a work made for hire, you'd want to strike that language. Now, they're going to get rights to the compositions anyway. If you do a work made for hire, boom, all the rights go to them. In this agreement, which is not a work made for hire, boom, you're given all the rights to them as a writer. But there is a significant difference in that if it's a work made for hire, as we'll discuss in a minute, you will not have any termination rights. That is, you'll never be able to get those songs back. If it's not a work made for hire, you will get those songs back after some period of time. So it's important for that language not to be in there. Furthermore, whenever you're giving exclusive services to someone, there might be the opportunity that you can operate outside of the agreement, as long as you can justify it somehow that it's taking care of the publisher's concerns. That is, you're not doing anything competitive to them, you're not taking any money away from them, you're not doing it so much that you're taking your time away from your services for them and doing something else. So in some agreements it might be possible to get exceptions to that exclusivity. In a publishing agreement, maybe the most you could ever even hope for, and it's still difficult, is that maybe you can get the right to do background movie scores or TV scores or commercial jingles, because those things, if they're instrumental, are usually not competitive to what the publisher's doing. If you limit the amount of times you're going to do it, it won't take time away from what you're doing for them, etc. So it may be possible, if you have a history of making money in that area, to be able to get that exception. And it also will make you feel better about giving the exclusivity, because you know you have some income source that can still be generated without them being possible. And you can't do background movie scores, instrumental TV scores, jingles, etc. If you're tied to somebody else, because the person who's hiring you to do that will want those things to be a work made for hire, and it is industry custom and acceptable for those things to be works made for hire. So keep those lessons in mind with respect to exclusivity. Number one, make sure it's narrow and specific as possible, the grant of rights. That's a contractual lesson you can use over and over and over again, as we'll see. Make sure it's not a work made for hire. And if you can get some kind of exception and you can legitimize it and take care of the publisher's concerns, maybe you can do something like that. All right. Paragraph number 2, which is the term or the duration of this agreement. Now, there are two durations that are at issue in this agreement. One is, how long does the publisher have rights to the writer's services? How long does that writer have to write exclusively for them? Number 2, a different issue, is how long does the publisher have rights to the compositions that are written during the term of the agreement? Now, this first paragraph, paragraph 2, deals with the duration of the right to the writer's services. And I just want you to ignore this entire paragraph. You should read the italics because it does talk about, the way this paragraph should be written. Unfortunately, the way this agreement occurred in the book, it was like a part of a co-publishing agreement. I want you to forget all that. Forget everything under 2 right there. The way paragraph 2 would be written is it would say the publisher has the rights to the writer's services for some number of years. And it could be anywhere from maybe 3 to 5 years. But it won't say 3 to 5 years because the way that these agreements are negotiated, if the one party has greater bargaining power, is it's going to be done in terms of options. Now, looking at both parties' perspectives, the publisher wants to be able to hold on to the writer for as long as possible. The writer wants to get out of it as soon as possible because if it's working, they can negotiate a better deal somewhere. If it's not working, they can go find somebody who does work for them. So those are the two perspectives. Now, because the publisher has all the bargaining power, these agreements are structured in terms of options. So if it were a 4-year deal, let's say, it would actually be called a 1+3. And you will see these types of structures in many, many different types of agreements. The first number, 1, usually refers to the amount of time that the publisher and the writer are bound to each other. So the 1+3, 1 year. 1 year, the publisher and writer have to live up to the terms of this agreement. The second number, the 3 in this circumstance, would be the number of consecutive and successive options that the publisher has to renew this agreement, so that after the first year, they get to decide, are things going okay here? Is this writer developing? Are we making any money? Whatever kind of criteria they're using, they'll decide, let me exercise an option for another year. And then at the end of that year, they get a chance to do it again. And at the end of that year, they get the chance to do it again. So 3 options to continue that deal for additional years, 1 year at a time. So you can see how this is a reflection of the bargaining power, is that the writer has to stay for as long as the publisher wants him, up to 4 years. The publisher can decide every year whether they want to get out of it, not have to pay any more advances, etc., etc. So if you have more bargaining power, as we'll see when we get to the other agreements, you'll negotiate a firm deal as a writer, where it's for a specific number of years. The publisher can't get out of it, and they're responsible for paying some serious and significant advances for each period. So that's the way you're going to, if it's early, you have no bargaining power, probably it's going to be structured in terms of options. If you have a little bit more bargaining power, it's going to be what we call a firm deal for 3 years, no options. All right. Pay attention to how options are structured. That is the formal process. Processes are always very important in contracts, what you need to go through in order to make something happen or to exercise a right or whatever. So you will see agreements where the publisher has an affirmative obligation sometime before the end of the current period to send notice to the writer saying, we want to extend this deal for another year. So that could be one way it's structured, which is pretty good. Publishers don't really like that. Can you think of why? They might forget. That's why. They might forget. And if they forget to exercise that option, then they lose rights to a potentially very valuable writer. So sometimes you will see the option says, hey, if the publisher does not send notice saying that they want to end the agreement, then the option is automatically exercised. That would be an automatic option. It requires no effort or action on the part of the publisher. Publishers don't like that either. Why? Because they might forget to get out of that deal if they want to get out of the deal. And both those situations have occurred numerous times in this business. And so in being creative and realizing that anything's possible in an agreement, sometimes you will see this structure, which is kind of disturbing. You have to be very mindful of it. And what it will say is, before the end of the current period, the publisher should send notice saying that whether they want to extend. And if they forget to send notice, then that current period continues until the writer sends a notice to the publisher saying, hey, you forgot me. Do you want me or not? And then the publisher has to exercise the option. The danger there is that, if you just let that period keep going, there's probably no commitment of further advances for that agreement extending, and they're getting rights to songs they're not paying for. So you have to be very careful and very mindful that if it does operate like that, that you go to the end of the period. If you haven't received any notice, that you send some notice immediately to the publisher saying, hey, you haven't done this. Now you have 30 days to say whether you want me or not. So, yeah, there's some process there. Usually also, as far as the commitment on the part of the writer, usually they are under an affirmative obligation to deliver a certain number of songs, minimum delivery requirement, MDR sometimes it's called. It goes by different initials. Minimum delivery obligation. That is a certain number of commercially acceptable songs within the discretion of the publisher that must be delivered each year by the songwriter. Usually that's somewhere between 10 and 20 songs. That's the minimum. Now remember, the publisher has rights to whatever that writer composes during the term of the agreement, but at least 10 to 20 of them have to be acceptable. And usually that's really not a problem. And remember also, this would be 10 to 20 wholly written songs. Wholly written songs. I don't mean religious songs, Christian songs. It means they have to add up to 10 to 20 wholly written songs. So if you have a commitment to deliver 10 songs to the publisher and you co-write every song with another writer, then each song will only count as a half. So instead of 10 songs, you'd have to deliver 20 songs. Is that correct? If you have a delivery requirement of 12 songs, and here's some math for you. If you have a delivery requirement of 12 songs, and you write all your songs with 2 other people, so really each one of those songs is only worth a third, how many songs would you have to deliver each year? Get your calculators out. 12 songs per year is your requirement. Each song counts as 1/3 of a song. So it's 3 times 12. You'd have to deliver 36 songs in order to fulfill your delivery obligation. All right. Please be sure, I'm going to set up a discussion board. Please be sure, with respect to each lecture, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, coming your way right now, that if you have any questions, you let me know. You can even do it by email if you want. But usually if you have a question, here's something you should know. Usually if you have a question, other people have that same question. And when I do something math like that, though that's pretty simple math, I will have a worksheet at the end that gives you the opportunity to make sure you understand how the math works with respect to that. All right. Ready for more? We're almost at 20 minutes. What's your attention span? I'm going to do a little more. This is a really important paragraph. This is the grant of rights. So, as I said to you in paragraph 3, whoa, did you read paragraph 3? Did you take a deep breath and read paragraph 3? Because I believe it's just one sentence. And it just shows you how great the effort is to try to make that language as narrow and specific as possible in some senses, and as broad and general as possible with respect to how rights are being acquired. So this one's, it's specific in its language, but it's very broad in terms of what the publisher is looking for. As you can see, as far as the duration is, how long does the publisher have rights to these particular compositions? It is, if a writer writes a song during this term, becomes subject to this agreement and the publisher has rights to that song forever. That is, we know that the agreement with the writer may end so that the writer can go sign somewhere else, but the songs stay with the publisher. And if you look at the language and the words used, they're irrevocably giving those rights to the publisher forever, or for at least the life of the copyright. Or sometimes the language used in agreements is in perpetuity. That's what it says. And it's pronounced like that. It's Latin. In perpetuity. That means forever. Now, even where the contract says in this paragraph 3, that I, the writer, am giving rights to those songs to the publisher forever, there are two opportunities for the writer to get those songs back. One, as you know, is granted by law. Those are the termination rights under the copyright law. That is, if it is not deemed to be a work made for hire, then sometime in the future, even though it says here, I'm giving it to you forever, pinky promise, blood brothers, whatever, you can still get them back by sending notice to the publisher 2 to 10 years before the time you want them back, and sometimes 35 to 40 or 40 to 45 years after that transfer has occurred. I'm not going to hold you to the process that the copyright law lays out, because you shouldn't be learning that in your copyright law class, but just know that you can get them back no matter what under the copyright law, as long as it's not a work made for hire. The other way you can get them back is not granted to you by law. It is negotiated for within the agreement, and that is if you can get a clause known as a reversion clause in your agreement, there may be some opportunity under some circumstances for you to get songs back, even though it says in perpetuity in this paragraph 3. I should just tell you as a matter of course that reversion clauses are very difficult to negotiate in the circumstance where the bargaining power is so disparate. So I would think that it wouldn't be likely for a reversion clause to be in an agreement like this. If I were a publishing company, I wouldn't want one. That is, I wouldn't want to have to give the songs back to the writer. I'd tell them, hey, we're making an agreement here. I'm paying you for these songs. I'm paying you to write these songs, and I'm putting my machinery to work to try to make money from these songs, and I don't want you to get them back. From the writer's point of view, they think to themselves, hey, if you're not doing anything with these songs, give them back to me and let me make something with them. So those are the two dynamics going on there. In this full publishing agreement, it's the publisher that's going to probably win that argument under most circumstances. There are circumstances under which you might be able to get it. Is there a reversion clause in this here agreement? Do you know? Do you know? Did you read one? Did you summarize one? Did you? Why, I think there is. And that is in paragraph 10, bear with me, paragraph 13, reversion clause. And so this is saying, just to summarize a little simplistically, what it says is, hey, you know what, if the publisher doesn't do something with the songs, I get to get them back. That's essentially what a reversion clause is. The two things that are negotiated in that clause are, number one, what gives rise to this right for me to get the song back? What does the publisher have to not do to get them back? And then number two, what do I have to do to get them back, the process by which to get them back? So the trigger that triggers the reversion rights, and then the process to get those rights back. In this one, the trigger is, hey, if the publisher doesn't get a cover recording of a composition, then the songwriter needs to send notice, and as long as there's no unrecouped advances, or they pay back any money that's owed to the publisher, they can get those songs back. An agreement of this type, that's really not fair for either party, the way that thing is written, for one thing, so that if a publisher has to give a song back if they don't get a cover recording's not even defined in here. It's not narrow and specific enough. So what a publisher can do is they can say to their daughter, hey, daughter, Megan, get your ukulele and sing the song into your phone, and that's a cover recording, and now the songwriter can't get that back. So you need to define what it is more specifically that the publisher has to do or not do in order for the songwriter to get the song back. The places where you might typically see this kind of reversion clause come into effect. Maybe if it were a single song agreement and some publisher said, you know, I really like this song, I'll give you 500 bucks. Kid, I'll give you 500 bucks for this song. And then they get the song forever. Then you say, hey, you know what? If in 3 years nothing has happened with that song, if I give you that $500 back, I get the song back. That might be reasonable. But under this circumstance, where the publisher is investing a whole bunch of stuff into their songs and their songwriters, where things might not happen right away, a song can get recorded 7 or 10 years after it's been written and after it's been shopped, and somebody says, I'll keep it in mind in the future. For it to say, hey, if you don't get a cover recording by the time this agreement ends, is inappropriate. So just 2 lessons to learn from here. Number 1, reversion clauses are very difficult to negotiate. You need some bargaining power. This agreement is not a situation where that bargaining power exists. And number 2, if there is a reversion clause, from both parties' perspective, you have to look at what triggers that reversion, the ability for the songwriter to get it back. Is that fair to either or both parties? And then what is the process by which the writer has to go through to get those songs back? All right, so even if the agreement says the grant of rights is forever, there are 2 ways you can get it back. By law, boom, termination rights, and then through negotiation, if you have enough bargaining power, through what we call a reversion clause. So that's that. Now paragraph 3, which is that grant of rights, also brings up a couple of other really, really important things. Number 1, you run out of energy and attention and breath reading that paragraph. So it might seem to you, yeah, I know they have to give away all the rights to the song, so it's just saying it in a million different ways, it's probably fine. But if you read it very carefully, or if you snuck through and read the italics, you would realize that there are 2 really big issues hidden in there that from a songwriter's point of view, even with very little bargaining power, you should be able to negotiate differently. And I will show you, I will send you how somebody might mark up these paragraphs. That is, say, hey, I got this offer, this agreement, and here's the changes that I want you to make. Number 1, the way the language is written. If you write a song with somebody else, collaboration, that song, you, by virtue of this paragraph, you are giving 100% of that song to the publisher, even your collaborator's share. Now, of course, you can't do that. And that's a contractual lesson you should be mindful of, is that never give away something you don't have. So the publisher doesn't actually get the rights, but now you've violated this agreement because you agreed when you wrote the song that they get 100% of the song. So they can actually sue you, your publisher, for whatever they've lost by not having that other half of that song. So that's completely inappropriate. There's also another paragraph occurring later on. I think that's the one. It's paragraph 10 called collaborations, where if you're a writer under this agreement, you have to notify your publisher when you're collaborating with someone else, and you have to make that collaborator sign over their portion of the song to the publisher. So these things are both overreaching from any point of view. So any indication that you give away the part of the song that you don't own should be stricken from this agreement. You are only giving them your share of that particular song. Number 1, that's number 1. You take that whole collaboration part out. Maybe you should notify them, I don't know. You notify them that you're writing with somebody else. And maybe you can be required to use your best efforts to have that collaborator give the rights over to your publisher. That's pretty common, a pretty common contractual provision that's used in a lot of different circumstances. It's a, air quotes, best efforts clause, meaning you are going to use your best efforts to try to get your collaborator. You're going to say, hey, I'm writing the song, you're not signed to another publisher. It'd be a really good idea if you signed over your portion of the song. And there are some compelling arguments why they should. I don't really have time to go into them right now, but as long as you've used your best efforts to try, you've fulfilled your contractual obligation. And if the writer does or doesn't, it's no skin off your nose. So that's what I would do, number 1. Number 2, it also says in this agreement, if you read this very carefully, is that you're giving away rights to songs that you've written already, written in the past. Look at that wording. You could have 1,000 songs. Now, obviously, the publisher is interested in signing you to this deal because they've heard some stuff that they think is good and that they think is interesting and that maybe they think they can do something with, or that shows the promise you have if they develop you properly. But they just can't get all the rights to all the songs you've ever written before you enter into this agreement. What you should do is have them go over your catalog, whatever you're coming to the table with, and to listen to that stuff and to make a determination as to which songs they want, so that we put it in a little exhibit, or what we call a schedule, to this agreement, an additional page, and it says these songs are also subject to this agreement. So you list those, only the ones they're interested in. And then, because you're giving them something, you should get something from them. Now, there is going to be a provision for them to have to pay advances to you almost immediately in this agreement. And those advances are compensating you for your writing services during the term of the agreement. If they want rights to songs that previously existed, there should be a separate advance associated with them. And then, additionally, those might be songs that you might be more likely to get reversion rights on, because they're probably paying you very little. Here's 20 songs we want the rights to, and here's an additional $10,000. And then by the time you get out of this agreement, nothing's happened with those previously written songs. You say, I'll give you back that $10,000 and give me the rights to those songs back. So that might be a situation where you might be able to get some reversion, but certainly not the way it's written here. So the two big things that you would negotiate in this part of the agreement are, number one, that they only get the rights to the songs that you have, the portion, the share that you have. And number two, that if they want rights to previously written songs, they have to pay you for those and list them in an exhibit to the agreement. All right, one more thing for you to think about before you go to episode number 2 is just like with respect to the exclusivity. Listen to this. Here's a paragraph where you're giving them 100% of the rights to your compositions, and that's the nature of the whole agreement. And you're going to have to do that under this agreement. However, in any agreement, just like with the exclusivity part, even though you're giving them all the rights to this stuff, and it explains them getting all the rights, and then in the other part of paragraph 3, it says all the stuff they can do with it, because they own it. They can do anything they want to with it. Even under those circumstances, there may be some things that you can say, I know you own this, but I don't really feel comfortable with you doing this particular thing with them. And so you put some kind of restrictions where perhaps there are some approval rights which might be necessary for them to do certain things. Once again, this is very difficult. We don't have bargaining power to do this. Publisher does not want their hands tied. This is me having my hands tied. They're paying money for this stuff. They're working this stuff. They don't want to be able to be restricted or limited as to how they make money with this stuff. So you have to understand their perspective there. But there may be some things that you might be reasonably be able to ask them for, because it's not really going to hurt them that much, or the potential for hurting you is so bad that it's justified and legitimate. So some of those things are listed in the italics, I think, but I want you to read through that before the next episode, and I want you to just think to yourself too, what can I prevent them from doing, that something that would be a tremendous concern to me that won't impede or restrict them too much. So that'll be the next episode. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk, and maybe I'll bring my puppy to the next one. Arrivederci.